Nehemiah chapter 1. Appreciate Renee's song because it goes right in. Joe, this little table thing you put on there, God bless you. That's so handy. Jesus said in the New Testament this promise to us that He would give us joy. Okay? He would give us an abundant life. That He would give us a peace that doesn't always make sense to us. It's a peace that happens in the midst of things, not a peace that comes because of the absence of things. But when He gave us that promise, He said that in this world you're going to have grief. You're going to have problems. You're going to have adversity and difficulties. Got a problem?
Well, there's a humming.
There's a hum. It doesn't know the words. It's my fan. And I'm not turning it off. That's better though, right? Yeah. My fan doesn't know the words, so it only hums. Anyway, in this life we're going to have adversity, we're going to have problems, we're going to have difficulties, and some of them are small. We were at dinner with a couple the other night, and they ordered a meal, and they asked for an extra plate because they were going to share. And the guy didn't bring the extra plate. And they began to fuss. And they began to complain. Any of y'all do that? I didn't see any hands. Y'all are cowards. And I sat there kind of going, oh. But for them, that was an adversity. That was a problem. Maybe, you go to the grocery store, you go to the gas station, you pay at the pump, And I think that's so handy. I remember when they used to come out and do it for you. And now you pay at the pump, and then the little thing will say, "See attendant inside." That drives me crazy. I don't want to pay at the pump because I don't want to go inside, Maybe that's your adversity. Or maybe your adversity is something, a little more tangible, a little more real. Maybe it's a problem at your work, a problem in your home. Maybe it's an adversity like Larry and Ken, which I owe an apology to Ken. I said you weren't paying attention last week. Ken was paying fine attention. He wasn't here last week. Yeah, you caught that. I didn't. My daughter corrected me when I got to the back. She said, he wasn't here last week. So maybe that's the sort of adversity that you got. But in this life, there will be adversities. Maybe that adversity is kind of like what we've been seeing on the news coming out of Egypt. The chaos and the madness and the riots and the shootings and all of that's going on in Egypt. He says, in life, you're going to have adversity. That just get used to it, okay? I want to give you great news. God's going to have problems in your life. Wow, give me more of that, right? But Jesus said you're going to have adversity, but you're going to have my peace and my presence. And that is good news, right, Larry? Amen. Larry was telling me earlier that, he was in the hospital and they're getting ready to do the surgery and, they're doing all this prep work and everything. And his pulse rate was what, 67? 53. His blood pressure was nice and calm. It's like, man, what'd they give you? He said, they didn't give me anything yet. He just had that peace that God gives. And, we need to remember that. But I don't want to camp there today. That's not what Nehemiah is about. I wanted to remind you of God's promise to be with you. What I want to look at today is the problems that you have in life, other people have in life. The adversities that you have in life, other people have in life. When I went to see Ken at the hospital, he wasn't the only one in that hospital. You know that? Imagine that. There was other people there. When I went and checked on Larry, he was in room 4036. There was at least 35 other rooms on that floor. And there were people in them going through the same thing. Problems that you have, other people have. So let me get to the heart of the message. Stop complaining. No, that's not it. They have problems, you have problems. If you know Christ, hopefully you experience His peace. But a lot of them don't. A lot of them face the same things that you face, and they don't have the benefit of the peace that you have access to. That's sad, isn't it? You ever heard anybody say, you know, I don't know how people face X or Y without the Lord? You ever said that? Well, you know, I want to take that and I want to challenge you this morning to say, if that is something you thought, then maybe you ought to consider being the one to share with them Jesus. Because that's what Nehemiah did. Here in Nehemiah chapter 1, beginning in verse 1, Nehemiah was a Jew. Nehemiah was a Jew, though, that lived in Babylon. He'd been carried away into captivity. His people had been carried away into captivity. Matter of fact, this takes place about 150 years after the fall of the southern kingdom. It's been a long time that these people have been dispossessed in another land, under another ruler. And yet, rather than just say, you know what, I'm kind of focused on myself and what's going on here, Nehemiah, it records, had a different focus. He says this, the words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah. Now, it happened in the month of Shishlev in the 20th year. Now, the month of Shishlev is our November, December time. And he's talking about the 20th year of the reign of Artaxerxes, the king of Persia. So he'd been there a while I was in Susa, the capital. That Hanani, one of my brothers, and some men from Judah came, and I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped and had survived the captivity and about Jerusalem. Now again, it's been about 150 years since the nation of Israel had ceased to exist. The walls have been broken down. They'd been defeated by the Babylonians. They'd been carried away, but some had been left in the land. They, as a nation, didn't exist anymore, but not everybody was gone. Some had remained and had continued to eke out a living there in the land, just kind of, you know, as sojourners, not really as a organized group of people, but just individual communities trying to get by. And it's apparent, at least to me, right here at the beginning, that this is something that's been laying on Nehemiah's mind. Because he says there that Hanani and one of my brothers and some other men, they came to Susa from Jerusalem and Judah, and I asked them, how are the people doing? How are the people doing? How's the city of God doing? That's what Jerusalem was. You and I really can't kind of quite have the same sort of attachment to our capital that they do to theirs. You and I, capital of Arizona is Phoenix, and the capital of the United States is Washington, D.C., and usually when we talk about either one of them, it's in a negative way. I hope the legislature doesn't meet. We don't need another law, you know? These people looked at the city of Jerusalem as the place of the temple, as the place where God promised He would meet with His people. And therefore, it kind of became the central place of identity for them. We as the people of God have a place where our God said He would dwell and He would meet with us. So right here at the beginning of the letter, we find something very interesting in the life of Nehemiah that I hope that you would kind of pick up on and maybe incorporate into your life. Nehemiah had a concern. And his concern wasn't for him. He didn't say, well, you guys think you got it rough there, you ought to be in my place. You don't see that being said. It says that Nehemiah was concerned for the people. He was aware of their plight. He was aware of what was going on. He was aware of the difficulties that must be taking place, and he's inquiring about them. He's asking, so, hey, how are the people doing? How's so-and-so, and how's so-and-so? And how about so-and-so? And in another way, he's concerned about God. How's the temple? How's Jerusalem? What's going on there? Nehemiah was a person who had a concern for others. Somebody just this week told me, you know what? It's a lot better in life when we kind of get the focus off ourselves. When we stop making it about me and what I have or don't have. And maybe when I start thinking about other people. Husbands, raise your hands. Okay, now to be a husband, you have to have a... Thank you. Boy, that wasn't a hard one, was it? Whoo! Boy, I get a little worried about you guys, but that's all right. Didn't have the screen to tell you. Yeah, I know all us husbands are trained just to do what we're told. My wife gets on me. She says, why didn't you do such and such? I said, did you tell me? She said, no. I said, you've spent 30 years training me. Don't expect me to deviate now, you know. Wives, raise your hands. Now watch this, watch this, watch this. To be a wife, ladies, you have to have a... Boy, they were quick. They were right on it. They're sharper than us guys, you know. To be a husband, you have to have a wife. To be a wife, you have to be a husband. Parents! What do you have? Now, this is going to be the good one. Grandparents! I don't have. Someday I hope to join that club. Okay? Great-grandchildren. How about this one? How about this one? Any great? There you go. To be grandparents and great-grandparents, you have to have grandkids and great-grandkids. To be parents, you have to have kids. My point is guess what, guys? Life's not about you, it's about your wife. Wives, guess what? Life's not about you, it's about your husband. Guess what, parents? Life's not about you, it's about your kids. Guess what, grandparents? And life's not about you, it's about your grandkids. You got plenty of things to focus on other than yourself. Now let's try this one. You have a neighbor? Okay? They may be next door, in my case, 15 feet away. They may be a little further, and Jim and Kathleen, they've got a few more distances to go there. But all of us have neighbors. So you've got somebody else to be concerned about. You don't have to say, oh boy, I've got my little hole of heaven right here. And everything is going well or not going well. You got neighbors, you got people to be concerned about. That's how Nehemiah was. Nehemiah lifted his eyes off of what was going on in his life, and he thought about other people. He was outwardly focused. What a marvelous concept. We've lost that. We've lost it in society, and we've lost it in the body of Christ. We've made Christianity about me. Oh, God came to do this for me. Well, yeah, He did. But He also came to do it for the person sitting next to you, for your wife, for your husband, for your kids, for your grandkids, for your neighbors, for that stranger you don't even know and that one you don't even like. He came to do the same thing for them. So why hoard it to yourself and just make it, oh God, my life's not going well. They didn't bring me a plate at Cracker Barrel. Smite them, dear God, smite them. Or, my life is this or my life is that. Now, I'm not going to take anything away from what was going on in Larry's department last week. That's pretty big stuff. When they pull your heart out your chest and take a look at it, that's not a bunion. But you know what? I've heard stories where people were in the hospital with some serious stuff, and they got up out of their bed and they went and visited other people because they had things going on in their life as well, and they had something to share. Larry laid there, and Larry, I'm going to brag on you, okay? I'm going to brag on you. Larry was into drugs for a few days. No, that's not what I'm bragging about. Larry evidenced a spirit of trusting God. He wasn't worried about himself. And as far as I could tell, while he was concerned about his lovely wife, he wasn't worried about her either. Kind of figured God had those bases covered. And if we camp out there, if you're a Christ follower, and you come to that place of realization with God that He's going to take care of you, then you know what? Maybe you got something to give. He's taking care of you. Why not share that with somebody else? Part of the problem is that we bought into the cultural system that says it is all about us. Part of the problem is that we're not living the abundant life that Christ has promised. We don't know about, experience that joy and that peace and that fullness. I'll tell you what. Where's my wife? Where'd she go? She ran away. Did I say something wrong? Okay. Yet. My wife and I went to a 50th wedding anniversary last night for a couple that we've known for about 30 of those 50 years. And And we saw a lot of people there that we hadn't seen in a long time, and a lot of them had had a whole lot of things go on in their life. And when driving home, we were talking, and I said, you know what? We got a pretty good life. We got a pretty good life. Matter of fact, one of them said, y'all been married a long time. You know why they said that? Because their daughter had been married 3 times. You know? Y'all been married a long time. And I thought, you know, we've had some bumps and some hiccups in our life. But God's been awful good to us. Man, I got a wonderful wife. I got a wonderful daughter. I got a couple of dogs that'll drive me crazy, but I love them to death too. We've had some problems. We've had some difficulties. We've had some hardships. But you know what? I got a pretty good life. And maybe I need to stop complaining about what I think I've missed out on and enjoy what I got. And if I can get there and realize how good God's been to me, then I got something to share with somebody else. And that's how Nehemiah is. He's looking at these people and he's saying, I'm concerned about you. So he asked about him, and verse 3 says that the people told him, the remnant there in the province who survived the captivity, they're in great distress and reproach. The walls of Jerusalem are broken down and the gates are burned with fire. Those are 2 things that the invading army always did. It'd be like me saying, I punched holes in your wall, kicked in your door, busted out your windows. Now anybody has access to your house. They had no protection. Well, I want you to notice Nehemiah's response. He was a good godly, church-going man. It says, when I heard these words, I said, tough rocks on them. It's a bummer being them. They got what they deserved. Wow, it really stinks being in your shoes. I've had people come to me sometimes and they'll kind of bemoan their life and they'll say, my boss, he gave me a bonus. Last year it was $3,000. This year it's only $2,200. I just look at him and say, sucks being you. That's not very compassionate. And that's not what Nehemiah said either. He said when he heard these words, he sat down and he wept. He mourned for days. He said, I was fasting and I was praying before the God of heaven. And I said, I beseech you, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God. It's the last time you uttered those words and you prayed. The great and awesome God who preserves the covenant and loving kindness. That's chesed, my favorite Hebrew word. It's just so much more than, what we think of as loving kindness. It's a covenant, faithfulness to who He is and what He has said, regardless of who we are and what we do. It says you preserve the covenant and the loving kindness for those who love Him and keep His commandments. Let your ear now be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant, which I'm praying before you now, day and night, on behalf of the sons of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the sons of Israel, which we have sinned against you. I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you, and have not kept your commandments, nor the statutes, nor the ordinances, which you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the words which you commanded through your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though those of you who have been scattered were in the most remote parts of the heavens, I will gather them from there, and I will bring them to the place where I cause my name to dwell. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeem by your great power and your strong hand. O Lord, I beseech you, may your ear be attentive to the prayers of your servant and the prayer of your servants who delight to revere your name. Make your servant successful today and grant him compassion before this man. And then it says, now I was the cupbearer of the king. Nehemiah was concerned for other people. But he didn't just sit there and say, bummer being them. Nor did he take that approach that we do in church sometimes, and we say they're getting what they deserved. Nor did he take the approach that a lot of us tend to take as believers and crawl up inside of their grief and wallow in it. Oh, so-and-so's life is so terrible, and maybe it is. And maybe they got a lot going on. And maybe it breaks your heart like it broke Nehemiah's heart. But he didn't stop there. In your house and you hear your neighbor screaming, you rush out and you care about your neighbor. I mean, you really like your neighbor. It's not like being a neighbor to Jerry Kemp. You really like them. No, just kidding, brother. You rush out and you see their house all afire and you hurt inside for them. You grieve, you ache. You're worried. And you sit down there on your step and you just cry. But you never pick up the phone and call the fire department. Somebody else will do it. You don't look at your wife as the tears roll down your face and say, I told them they needed to get a fire extinguisher in the house. I told Joe that he shouldn't, have that cigarette in his den. I told him they shouldn't do, oh, this is terrible. You don't do that, do you? You call the fire department, you get the water hose, you rush over there to see if you can help. It's not enough just to have compassion. And it wasn't enough for Nehemiah just to have compassion. He interceded. We don't hear that word a lot. Interceded. You know what intercession means? You know what that word intercede means? It means to do for someone what they are unaware or incapable of doing for themselves. Somebody falls down there incapable of getting up, you intercede in the situation and you help them. Sometimes all of us are too stupid to know what to do. And if you're a son, your mama knows what I'm talking about. And she intercedes for you. Dear Lord, protect my boy. He ain't got the good sense you gave him. I was praying that way for a friend of mine today. He's married and they're having some trouble and they're doing things and you're just going, man, this is a train wreck and I can't look away. And I said, and I wonder how many people felt that way when I got married. And I started praying, Lord, just take care of him because he ain't got the good sense to know what he's doing is wrong. Nehemiah interceded. He did for people what they were either unaware or unable to do for themselves. He started by praying. You notice that big old long prayer there takes up the vast majority of the first chapter. He goes before God and he says, be attentive, open your ears. Listen to what I'm saying for your servants, for your people Israel. They're not praying. Not just those in the land, but even those that are in captivity. They've been here for 150 years. The Coptic church in Iraq and Iran is the descendants of these people. Some of them got real comfortable and said, oh well, here's where we are. And so he says, God, they don't even realize it. So Lord, let me come on their behalf. Let me intercede before you for them. Let me what? Let me confess their sins. There in verse 6, confessing the sins of the sons of Israel, which we have sinned against you, I and my father's house. We've sinned, we've acted very corruptly. We've not kept your commandments, nor your statutes, nor your ordinances that you gave us through Moses. Take a look at verse 8. I love this. Remember the words that you commanded your servant Moses, if you're unfaithful, I'll scatter you amongst the people. You warned us. You told us and we didn't listen. Lord, I'm confessing this to you. They don't know that they need to. Now, let me take a moment to explain. I'm not talking about generational sin. Okay? My sin's my sin and your sin's your sin. You're accountable for yours and I'm accountable for mine. I will not confess the sins of white men in slavery because I wasn't there. I will apologize to the African American community and I will tell them, and it was wrong, but I wasn't there. I didn't do it. So I can't confess what I did because I wasn't there. But I surely can acknowledge that it was wrong. And that's what Nehemiah's doing. He's saying, I got sin and I'll confess that to you. And some of the people here got sin and I'll admit that it's there. And some for the last 150 years have continued to do the same thing. And Lord, I'm agreeing with you that, boy, we have messed it up. But I'm also agreeing that you've been awful good to us. You warned us. You told us. Then in verse 9, what does he say? You also promised us that if we'll repent, you'll bring us back together again, no matter where we may be. You know, ultimately, verse 9 was fulfilled in 1947 when the nation of Israel was reestablished as a people. Isn't that cool? Stuff works, man. Stuff works. He interceded before God on behalf of the people of Israel. He got in there and he said, this is something I can do. I'm not just sitting there going, oh, this is a terrible lot. There's something I can do. Some of you got kids that you look at and your heart breaks for them. Some of you got friends and your heart breaks for them. And we crawl up inside of their problems. And you know what we call that? Codependency. Because their pain is our pain. I like to call it the Bill Clinton syndrome. I'll feel your pain. Okay? Now, get me. I'm making a little fun at President Clinton's behest, but I'm not saying there's anything wrong with feeling your pain. What I'm saying is there's something wrong when you stay there. Man, Jim, I fell down. Matter of fact, I did this as a kid. I fell down and I run a knee right up or a nail right up my knee. A knee right up my nail. And I went down, boom, and it hurt. And I came up and my brother looked at me and he said, bummer, man, you got a nail in your knee. And I said, wow, I got a nail in my knee. And then you know what I did? I pulled that bad boy out. I didn't just go, oh, I got a nail in my knee and walk around and tell my grandma, look at my knee. It hurts. Of course it's going to hurt. You got a nail in it, boy. God be with my boy. He ain't got the sense you gave him. Understand? She knew me. I pulled that knee out. I did something. I pulled that nail out. I left my knee there. And it's that left knee. I've always gotten in trouble with that left knee. Nehemiah didn't just stop there and say, oh, what a terrible thing. He said, there's something I can do. I can begin to pray. I can go before God. I can intercede on behalf of the nation of Israel, for my brothers and my sisters. And let me tell you something. Prayer works. Prayer makes a difference. I love people say, all I can do is pray. Hey, there's power in prayer. God, move, change, direct, help my kid. I'll tell you what. I have found out that God's capable of doing in my daughter's life a whole lot more than my nagging is. Think about that. I don't call it nagging, I call it exhortation. And I would exhort her, sometimes loudly. And nothing would happen. And then I'd go before God and say, God, touch my daughter. And He moves on her heart. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't times you need to exhort. Because Nehemiah did that. We'll see that in just a moment. But don't underestimate prayer. Matter of fact, most of what this book, this chapter 1, sets up the rest of the book, and I encourage you, it's not that long. See, it's only 78 chapters. I mean, that's not just kidding. It's 13. It's 13 chapters long. Read the rest of the book. It's set up here in chapter 1. And most of chapter 1, 70% of chapter 1 is devoted to prayer. Start praying. Look at your neighbors. Get your eyes off your own life. Look at your wife. Look at your husband. Look at your kids. Look at your grandkids. Look at your great-grandkids. Look at your neighbor. Look at your community. Look at the people that are around you. Look at those people in Egypt. Look at those folks in Washington. Look at those people down in Mexico and their chaos. And start praying. Lord, I know the peace you've given me. And Father, I pray you'd bring your peace on them. We were going to town last night and there was an accident. Bummer. Glad it wasn't me, right? Said that. Come on, confess your sin. You've been there. No, we started praying. Lord, be with those people. Don't underestimate the power of prayer. But then notice what he says. Oh Lord, verse 11, I beseech you, may your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and the prayer of your servants, because he knew there were others, who delight to revere your name. And hear this. Make your servant successful today. grant him compassion before this man. What man? And then the next line says, now I was the cupbearer to the king. Nehemiah had a plan. Nehemiah had an idea in mind. Nehemiah thought, you know what? I have access to the king. And you know what, God? Maybe he might be willing to help. I've seen him do it before. Or maybe you just put it on my heart. But Lord, I'm going to go talk to him. And help me to be successful in what I'm about to do. Nehemiah didn't just have compassion, and Nehemiah didn't just pray, but Nehemiah had a plan and he did it. Now, I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing. I went, wait a minute, what if my plan's wrong? You know? What if my plan is, I'm a neighbor to Jerry Kemp, and Jerry likes to play his music long and loud. And Jerry only likes two types of music, country and western. And so I go, Lord, I care for Jerry. And I pray for Jerry. And then I say, help me to be successful today, because I'm going to go break into Jerry's house and bust every one of his CDs. Now, first of all, I ought to know that's not God's heart. But let's say I don't have the sense that God gave me. And I pray, Lord, help me to do that. God will tell me, no, I'm not going to bless that one, brother. That's just wrong. It happened to Paul. You read in the, I believe it's 12th chapter, 11th chapter of the book of Acts. Paul said that we were traveling through Asia and we really kind of had this plan set out, but the Spirit forbid us from going there. He shut the door. I mean, I had a plan. I had a thought. I kind of, knew what I wanted to do. And God said, no. And then you had the view of the man from Macedonia. Remember that? Come on over here. And God opened the door for them to preach the gospel in Achaia and that whole area. Remember that? If you don't go into the book of Acts, read it. It's really cool. God's not going to let you go and do what He doesn't want you to do. So if you've got a plan, if God's put it on your heart, and you're praying about it, Lord, help, if this is your will, make it be successful. If He doesn't want you, you'll slam the door. But don't just sit there and go, well, God, do something. I think if it were me, I'd do this. And God goes, don't just sit there. Lord, if this is your will, help me to do it. Put some feet to those prayers. Reach out to your neighbor. Well, what if I make a mistake? Well, what if you make a mistake? God's not big enough to use a mistake? Trust me. He's using one today. God's big enough to use mistakes and weak attempts and our best effort. Every time God blesses, He uses imperfect vessels. Give Him a chance. Well, what do I do? Maybe you just go to your neighbor and maybe you just get to know him. I want you to know that we're praying for you. Maybe that's all you do. Or maybe your neighbor's house has, been hit by a tree, and guess what? You got a chainsaw. Take your chainsaw over. It's not enough to just have compassion for people. You need to pray. You need to pray for them. You need to pray for God. Lord, move in this situation. Help me to know your heart in this situation. And then you need to do something. Anybody here dead? Checking? All right, I don't see any hands. If you're not dead, if you're alive, if you're still here, then God's not finished with you yet. You agree with that? I mean, really, let's be honest. Or do you look at your life and you say, you know what, at this point in my life, it's about what God's going to do for me. Let me share with you a parable in closing. There was a farmer in the Bible. Ken will like this story. He was a farmer with his John Deere green tractor and his farmer tan. What'd you have, brother? John Deere red? Good. I was going to say that's wrong. That's like a white fire engine. I'm sorry, Mesa's wrong. Fire engine is supposed to be red. Tractor is supposed to be green. International. I'll give you that one. Okay? He's got his tractor and all. He'll like this. There's this farmer in the Bible that was a successful farmer. And he says, you know what, God? You've been so good to me. I'm going to tear down my barn. I'm going to build a bigger one. Because look what you're doing for me. And what did God say? You fool. Tonight your soul's going to be required of you. Don't take that harshly like God's going to kill you. I look at it this way. We need to talk about this, and I'd prefer to do it in person. So come on up. Sometimes you and I, we go, oh God, you've blessed me, you've filled my life, and now I'm going to sit here and I'm going to build up my barn with all the blessings you've given me, and I'm just going to be happy. And God says, I didn't give it to you to keep. I gave it to you to give away. A farmer doesn't make food just for himself. A farmer makes food for others. Share it with others. You know the peace and the goodness and the graciousness of God? Share it with others. Don't keep it to yourself.